Hello everyone, this is On Tyranny, the radio branch of Ancient Greece Revisited. You can find us on Facebook, where we create short documentaries on ancient Greece, trying to rediscover the inceptual thought behind ancient Greece. And as of the last medical crisis, within or without quotes, we decided to branch off on this little podcast we call On Tyranny, because of our fears that what we're witnessing, and for whatever reason, is a global medical tyranny on the guise of safety. And it would be a shame if we had all this knowledge of ancient Greece political philosophy and not apply it practically to what is going on today. And therefore I have a very special guest called Panagiotis Perros, a man who I came to know through his Facebook posts, which is strange because everyone keeps banging against social media. But it seems that social media and the internet in general has retained some of its original democratic potential. So after about almost a year of reading this man's articles and commenting and liking very much what he wrote, I invited him and he did me the honor of coming here. So without further ado, Panagiotis Perros, who is a scientific research fellow at the Philosophy, Politics, Economics Laboratory of the University of Athens. Panagiotis, thank you very much for accepting the invitation.
Hello there, I'm very glad meeting you online, and I hope that we'll have a very interesting conversation about all these interesting subjects you are mentioning.
I'm sure if I just let you talk, it's going to be interesting enough because you are what we say in Greek, chimaros. You are like a river, like a wild river.
Or a torrent.
A torrent,
It is a
exactly.
very trendy definition.
Exactly. And yeah, I mean, it's between, this one is between two Greeks. You know, I introduced you with your full scientific credentials, but it's also, I think, between two Greeks that are just deeply worried about what is happening in their country, correct?
I'm very happy that you're an extroverted person, so we can contact and communicate with different people in different countries and meet some other aspects that will help us also confronting our own problems and facing our own ideas.
Yes. I always extend invitations, and I'm surprised that people do respond. I mean, I've even sent invitations very high up, you know, the political ladder, which have not been reciprocated. But this is understandable. You know, on the more mortal plane, people who I've reached out, and I've had conversations from journalists to hypnotists. Believe it or not, I just finished a conversation with a hypnotist in Britain who believes that he can identify his techniques in mainstream media. This is yet to come. But you take a much more reasonable approach. And just to start off, just tell us a few things about your intellectual journey, because you did conquer the PhD level of academic excellency, so this must have been quite a journey. So please walk us through.
Philosophy is always between two great factors. The one is reality, the empirical world, as we say it, and the other one is mind. So the truth is not only based in our minds, but also the truth could not be found only in the world of experience. We have to combine the two worlds, the world that is made inside our brains and the world that is experienced outside our brain, which is tangible and which is always delivered to our senses. So if we take a look at our legacy, at our Greek legacy, we could find that Plato was always confronting mind problems, was like we call today idealist, and Aristotle was what we call today empiricist. Aristotle was confronting problems and was thinking about philosophical notions always heading towards the world of experience. So we have to combine Plato and Aristotle in order for us to search the great deal of knowledge available to us in this world.
The real truth, as some people say, although it's a bit of a contradictory expression.
Yes, the real truth, I don't know if there is a real or an unreal one, but I'm sure that we will be approaching in a more confident way the truth if we have these two aspects both in our minds, Plato and Aristotle. And if you can remember, if you can recall the famous painting of Raffaello in Vatican City, the School of Philosophy.
Yes.
And this painting depicts Plato and Aristotle in the ancient school of philosophy, among other philosophers. And Plato is pointing upwards towards the skies, and Aristotle is pointing downwards towards the earth.
Well, I never took notice of that. Very
Yes.
interesting.
So the philosophy is a combination of these two main worlds, the world of experience and the world of our brains.
Yes, and what I find very interesting, and it's been a recurrent theme in pretty much everything I write and I create online, that nowadays you see a swing towards the second, the world of experience. There is a very strong tendency, at least in the popular mind, in public intellectuals. I don't know what's happening in philosophy departments in the universities, but in the popular imagination, there's been a swing towards what we can call materialism, whereby the world of mind, the world of idea, is seen as reducible to matter. And whatever happens inside of our minds is seen as secondary, as illusory, as not really real. What do you say about this swing, of which, people like Richard Dawkins, perhaps, is a prime example among the public intellectuals that support, or Sam Harris. But it's conquering people's minds to the degree that most people out there, do believe that ultimately everything there is reducible to matter.
Yes, let us be clear about this issue. By saying the world of ideas and by saying idealism, we do not mean that there is an abstract, a complete abstract world that is, which is deep inside lies. No, this is not the actual truth. By saying ideas, we mainly refer to logic, to our rational thought, to mathematics, to algebra, to geometry, to these values that are tangible and we can count on them in a very specific way. So, for example, Descartes was an idealist, and the experiment is always after the rational thought. For example, some physicists in the 20th century were saying some theories about universe, and this theory was an idealist notion. But when this theory has come to experimentally depicted inside laboratories, then we have used our world of experience in order to examine the validity of the initial idealist notion. So, by saying idealism and by saying mind, we mainly think, we mainly believe, we mainly say that this is a tangible notion, it is a mathematically approached idea, and not an abstract lie, like the hypnotist or another supernatural theorists.
Yes, but even on that, like if we take it on that Cartesian level, Descartes did have a problem in showing how these two worlds could be linked, the res cogita and the res extensa, the cognitive part of reality, the mind, and the extended, as he would call, the physical, as we would call, reality. In other words, I can think about a very simple equation, 2 plus 5 equals 7. That's all happening in my mind. But I can also walk outside, and there's an apple tree next to my house, so I can say 1, 2 apples, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 apples, and then count them all together, and there'll be 7, just like I had imagined in my mind. And Descartes himself had trouble with how can these two realities, if they're so different, be connected. And his solution to the dismay, perhaps, of someone like Dawkins was God, was that these two realities are connected by some kind of divine plan or intervention. Today, however, what we find in people like Dawkins is the absolute submission of the res cogita, of the cognitive, of the mental, subjugated to the physical. So we have moved to a place that's very different from Descartes. This is the swing that I wanted to touch with you.
Well, I think that we have lost the balance. We have to find again a balanced approach between the two worlds. Because some centuries ago, during the Cartesian era, the laboratories were not present. We did not have the tools that we have today. Because these tools are necessary, are very essential in order for us to have the necessary data in order to approach the reality as it is. Because our senses are incomplete. We cannot have the perfect senses. For example, if you look at the night sky, you will see some stars, but you are actually seeing the history of these stars. The light is the history of the star, because according to physical natural laws, in order for the natural light of the star to reach
it needs
Earth,
some thousands of Earth years.
Of course. And if you look at an exact star, the exact time you are looking at it may be dead.
Yes, it corresponds to how the star was some
Of course.
billions
So you
of
have
years.
to examine these empirical data with your mind, with mathematical approach, in order to find the exact truth. So a combination and balance between the two worlds is always necessary if we're talking about science. But if we talk about another thing, okay, you could not rely to any of this, or just making some theories out of your fantasy.
Sure. So, but I understand that your idealism is very Cartesian, or you use that
Yes.
word in the very Cartesian sense. And yes, it's true that mathematics is an interesting beast, so to speak, because it's very precise, very clear. It's not something like love or hate or despair, and yet it exists in the mind. And science is ultimately based on something that exists only in the mind. Yet I'll just ask it one more time. I mean, there is this strange, to me, tendency throughout the world, and perhaps it is connected with the pandemic. I'm just gonna segue gently to our central theme by
Yes, of
quoting
course.
a German mystic. He said, "The best way to nurture microbes and disease is to go to bed every night thinking only materialist thoughts." So, in his view, it's almost like the whole of humanity has been going to bed only with materialist thought for the past few centuries, and it's this reduction of everything mental to the physical that I see being very pervasive. So much so that if someone talks about something like love, for instance, the people on the street, so to speak, the common people who are not trained, have been trained to kind of reply, oh, it must be something in the brain. It must be something in your neurons, something in your hormones, something in your cells. Everything being reducible. So how do you see this materialism perhaps even in combination with the pandemic?
Well, in order for me to tell you what the materialist approach worths, we have to define the material world and the mind, because if we suppose that mind is material, then it is the same thing. Philosophically speaking, because I cannot tell you that mind is always outside the material world, because we are material creatures. We are made of specific elements, so we cannot consider ourselves outside the nature. Now, regarding pandemic is a completely different issue. We have to have our data clear in front of us and make some clear notions about what is happening around us. I think it is mainly a political issue and not a health issue. Because till now, when we had a specific health problem, we are supposed to visit our doctor, our physician, and talk about the thing that we are facing. Now it is a little bit different. We mainly believe to what the politician says in our TV screens, and some of his employees with medical degree, maybe, but they are indeed his employees. They are trying to give us some advice without knowing our individual problems. That is a problem itself. When we are facing a health issue, the solution is always considered in an individual level. That is the primary source of medical science. Otherwise, we could not even approach our issues without visiting some doctor. So we have to reconsider all these aspects, and we have to look at it in a clear way, having in mind that our self is also a material one, but there is also a mind that has to be used in a very rational way. So, some politicians tell us that there is a pandemic. Okay, let us assume that there is an issue, and of course there is a real virus. Okay, what is actually the pandemic? Is it a health terminology, or it is a political terminology? We have to make some clear notion about this, because pandemic is not a disease itself. Pandemic is a situation based on health terms, but it is not a health term itself. It is a political term. So we have to consider the pandemic mainly by political approach, and mainly by ethical and philosophical approach, and secondary by health and by medical.
Yeah, it's worth noting that recently the definition of what constitutes a pandemic has changed. I think even in the World Health Organization, there's been a few news reports that have pointed to how the definition of what constitutes a pandemic has changed. So that kind of validates, I think, what you say, that it's a matter of definitions, essentially, is what you're saying.
Yes, it was Wittgenstein's approach to this phenomenon. Our main problems are linguistic ones, are not. So, if you are telling me about pandemic or about virus or about especially abstract notions such as truth or democracy or freedom, you will have to define what you mean by saying these terms. Because there is another thing I understand while you say, for example, the word freedom. That is not necessarily the same,
As
you
you
mean?
understand it, yes.
Yes. So we have to go back to the roots of these terms, and the actual source, in order for us to be exact, is ancient Greek philosophy. So it is a reliable way, in order for us to find the truth in a gnoseological level, to go back to these ancient Greek roots.
Yes, yes. And one thing with the definition of the pandemic that you mentioned, it's that without a definition, I think you end up in a deadlock whereby you go, okay, let's just pretend that a pandemic is exactly where we are now for some reason. What are the statistics? What are the case fatalities? What is the transmission rate? These numbers we baptize as a pandemic. If that is the case, which is as comical as it sounds, it's almost like what the government is doing. There is no clear way out of it because there is no notion of what is not a pandemic. In other words, how many deaths can we have per day or per month that is not considered a pandemic? Because if you do not have this definition, then there's no way out of the pandemic. Then everything is a pandemic.
According to epidemiologists, the actual infection fatality rate of this specific virus is about 0.2% or 0.3 or 0.4 at the maximum level. So let us imagine if there was a virus with 2% infection fatality rate. What would happen to our world? For example, at this time, we have lost almost all our liberties. We have, especially in Greece, we have to send an SMS message in order for us to go outside our home. So, what would happen, let us imagine what would happen if there was a virus with 2% or 3%. Would it be rational for the government, for example, to have snipers at the rooftops in order to protect us against this virus of the 2% or 3% infection fatality rate?
Yes, shooting at the virus, I think. Which no joke, because as of I think couple of days ago, Australia deployed the army. I don't know if you've heard, but Australia deployed the army to quote unquote help with the enforcement of the measures. So as comical as it may sound, it's not that funny, you know.
Yes, but if we consider this as a solution, if we consider that army could be actually prescribed by physicians, then this is a slippery slope, as we call it in philosophy. What would happen if some other dangerous situation comes in front of us? Till today, I consider that these lockdowns was not a solution under any circumstance. For example, if we had a nuclear catastrophe, if we had some nuclear war, would lockdown solve any problem in this utter disaster? No. I could not imagine that lockdown could be a solution in any case.
Sure, sure. I mean, for me, it goes one step further because even if we can conceive of a crisis where lockdowns would be a good measure to take, the problem is that the forceful imposition of these lockdowns shows that the government looks at citizens as incapable of making simple, rational decisions for their own good. This, for me, is the grave danger. There's a mutation in the way that governments look at citizens now, I think.
Yes, because we suppose that government knows better what is good for us. So we are incapable of taking care of our bodies and of our minds and of our lives in general. So if we take this notion as granted, then it is indeed a slippery slope, and we could accept even harder measures. We could accept, for example, a guard inside our living room telling us when is the most reliable time for us to go to bed or to go to the bathroom, etc. So it is a slippery slope that is the greatest problem of our times. And I think that it is not very stable talking about today. I think that we have to consider that in the near future there will be also some factors that will lead us to make some extraordinary thoughts. It is only the beginning.
Yes, and I mean, I just have to ask, right? Because I am someone who's trying to be very careful when it comes to conspiracy theories. I know that there are conspiracy theories out there, and they can be pretty stupid if you ask me.
Yeah, of course,
But
but
it's very
you do not need conspiracy theory in order for you to explain what is happening around you. If you do
no.
not need some conspiracy, then move it, take it apart.
True. But it's just the conversation as we're having it leads us to ask, like, why is this happening? Like you said, that this is the first step, if I understand you correctly, to an escalating authoritarianism. Why?
We have to we have to go back to Machiavelli's theories. You have to find an enemy, a great enemy, in order to make your people afraid of this enemy, and then everything is allowed for you, for governor. You are allowed to do things that in any other situation would not be even conceived by your people. So if you give a great deal of money, a great deal of authority in government, you cannot take it away, or it is very hard to take it away. So you have to take care at the exact moment you are giving these authorities and these
powers.
These powers to the government, because it is very difficult to take them back.
And I understand that you are of the libertarian conviction, let's say, at least in the
Yes, why
economics.
not? It is a very rational thought.
Yeah, it is very rational, and I may have my criticism, but that's for a different conversation. But to me, it's very interesting that a big part of libertarianism comes as a warning to statism. In other words, the most important libertarian thinkers were very critical of state authority, and they were very quick to see when the state moves in to consolidate its powers, to take over a sector of the economy. They were very quick to notice. They were trained, these early libertarian thinkers, to point to whenever the state oversteps its limits. For instance, Friedrich Hayek, whose book The Road to Serfdom essentially points to how the state used emergency measures, I think it was for the World War, that it imposed for wartime measures that it never took back. So like Friedrich Hayek was very quick to see how this could go wrong, but the Hayekians, the libertarians today that I meet, with you obviously as an example, and some other people, but most libertarians that I talk to do not have these reflexes. They do not see this danger.
Or they are not many. If they are few, they cannot be heard by us.
So you think there's still a libertarian resistance somewhere?
Yes, but we cannot reach it. For example, I can post some libertarian thoughts in social media. Who else is doing that in Greece? I myself, I have met 2 or 3 people doing the same thing, especially during the first lockdown in Greece, where all people here were terrified and could not even think that another approach is suitable for this pandemic period.
Yes, true. But again, if you are a libertarian, you should have your guard up, as they say in martial
Of
arts.
course, because liberty is above all, even above your health. Because let us consider that we had to make some revolution like 80-21 here in Greece. What was the mortality rate of the of revolution? Let us
Yes.
think the exact mortality rate that Kolokotronis was facing. It was above 50%.
Yes, 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 yes. All the great struggles, yeah, were done with mortality rates that were significantly higher than COVID, I
Yes, it
think.
was not 0.2%.
Yeah, and just to honor a very good friend of mine, without mentioning his name, we had this conversation. And on the first lockdown, my main argument was that, I don't exactly know what this thing is, but what I see is a total miscalculation of the and benefits. In other words, what I saw is that everyone was talking about the virus and how many people might die, but no one was talking about how many people might die because of the measures. And you should at least put these two things in a scale and see which one is heavier. And who knows, back then, I mean, perhaps perhaps someone who could say that the virus part was heavier, but at least this measurement had to be done, and it was not done. And this friend of mine corrected me and said, yes, partly, but there's another thing that I'm missing. He said exactly what you said, Panagiotis. Said,
Of course, this is
uh,
an ethical issue. It is not a health issue, as you can
yeah,
say. Yeah.
yeah, and he corrected me and he said there's one more thing, which is exactly what he said. He said in our country, in Greece, not long ago, he meant a couple 200 years, or not long ago actually, we said eleftheria ή θάνατος, give me freedom or give me death, which is a very common revolutionary slogan, which means that these people understood exactly what he said. There are things that are even more important than life, right?
Of course, please recall Thomas Hobbes' theory about Leviathan. I don't know if you are familiar with these theories, but Thomas Hobbes then considered that there was a creature and an idealist notion called Leviathan, which could give people the utter protection, which could give society the utter protection from dangers they had to face during their natural life when they were free out in the jungle. So, Leviathan has to extract liberties from people in order to give them safety, in order to secure their body
Their
from.
health, yes.
Yes. If we give Leviathan, if we give a modern governor such great authorities upon our bodies, we have to lose the maximum amount of liberties. But Hobbes was beginning this theory with a specific philosophical acceptance that man is not good in his natural condition. That man is actually a wolf for his fellow citizen.
I think he
If we
said,
accept
yeah.
that man is a wolf for his fellow citizen, then we suppose that we need someone to protect us from our fellow citizen. The socialists are accepting this notion in order to impose some of their great measures upon our heads. So, if we accept this Hobbesian approach, then everything is excused and everything is rational around us, and we have to accept it as it is. But let us think that some other people, called ministers or governors, do not know what is actually good for us, and they are taking care only about their own lives and their personal properties. So we have to consider that our life is not something that could be given to anyone else apart from ourselves. We have to take care about our lives, our families, and we know what is good for us, and we do not need any Leviathan or any minister because there is no angel among us. If we consider that there are angels among us that have supernatural powers and they are ready to help us in front of these disasters, then yes, okay, take some liberties, dear angel, and okay, do whatever you need to do in order for us to be safe.
Yeah, I think like talking about Aristotle, this was also one of Aristotle's arguments in his Politics, where when at the, I guess, one of the last sections, he mentions the panvasilia, which I guess very loosely, to use a modern term, would be like one world government, so to speak, like one vasilias, one king to rule everyone. And he actually considers it for a moment as to whether that is good. And obviously, if that particular individual that occupies this place is a wise king, then yes, it can be good. But he comes to the conclusion that essentially the problem is that this presupposes that men know in advance how to recognize the good, the virtuous, the wise from the rest. But if that was already the case, then we would not have politics, because politics is exactly what we're missing from nature. Wolves, they recognize the alpha just by smell, so they don't need politics, because the one who should lead is you can smell him into power. Men are not. We do not recognize the virtues, and so we need an art that is taught, like playing the piano, like painting, like math, to help us somehow promote the worthier among us. So this
Let me ask you
Leviathan.
a question. If let us consider that there is a wolf in nature chasing a rabbit. Is actually wolf a bad being while
No,
chasing the rabbit? And the rabbit, could we suppose that rabbit is the good one?
only in cartoons.
Of course. Nature has not ethical values in itself. Nature exists as it is. We are ethical beings, and we are making ethical notions. Nature has no ethics inside it. So politics, ethics are only human based. There is no ethical rule at the exact time that a cat eats a mouse, or at the exact time a storm sinks a ship. A tsunami is not bad, or a tsunami is not also something good. A tsunami happens, an earthquake happens. Nature is not bad. We conceive it as a bad according to our beliefs and according to the bad consequences in our lives and our properties.
Yes. So
Maybe viruses are here centuries ago, and we were very familiar till now living among viruses and bacteria. Were we bad persons 2 centuries ago that we did not declare, when we did not declare a pandemic? Are we now nobler persons, and are we now good persons while declaring a pandemic?
well, many people will come back and say, well, some people, I guess, could even say, yes, we are now, we know more, or we have the means to do it.
Only in ethical level, not about knowledge or science. Of course, science is progressing while years go by, but let us think at its essence. Are we now good persons, and weren't we good persons 50 years ago?
Well, for me, the answer is no. But it almost seems like that for some, the answer is yes. For some people, and actually, this ties to a wide set of notions that have to do with political correctness. People today a lot of people that I meet feel that yes, some kind of ethical evolution has happened in the past 20 years, whereby now we understand how bad racism is and how bad homophobia is, and before they used to
Yes,
chase,
but is there any natural law or any natural measure that makes this specific policy better than the previous ones?
Again, for me, no. For me, no. But it seems that a lot of people have fallen for it, Panagiotis, and I don't understand why there's so little criticism out there. Like your voice is one of very few, and I don't understand why.
Look, there are very drawbacks regarding the society in general, because especially in Greece, but Greece is not the worst case scenario. If we take a look at other countries who do not belong to such great alliances like European Union, they are actually the worst case scenario because let us think about African states. They are clearly depending on the help of other states, and during the pandemic, this help is very difficult to be given. If you take the ability from the people to live by their own powers, it is very difficult to ask them to think freely because if you are hungry, you cannot be free.
Yes, you're
And if
dependent.
this hunger is imposed to you by your state, and if you are actually put inside a jail, then it is very difficult for you to think freely because the primary need you have to satisfy is the hunger, and the hunger is the ultimate governor of yourself and not your clear thinking.
Yes, and it seems that more and more the government is coming in. I mean, it's a strange double pinch move, like the German army, I guess, whereby, on one hand, you have the progressive destruction of the economy through the lockdowns, through the measures. I mean, even something like, social distancing, which sounds like the mildest of the measures. For restaurants, it essentially means you're going to have half your clients. And that's it. So you have a progressive destruction of the economy. And on the other side, you have all these little bonuses and you hear talk about universal basic income, etc. So are we all becoming like employees of the state now?
Yes, so it is a transformation of economy. It is not a distraction, and it is a transformation from the individual economy, from the free market to the governmental market, to the governmental-driven market. So we have to think about the consequences of this transformation. Would it be a good consequence? Would we have good consequences in 10 years from now? Would this thing be
Be a
good
positive.
for us? Would we live? Could we live a good life? What history tells us about this new financial and economic status?
It reminds the Soviet Union for sure.
Yes, what happened to Soviet Union? What happened to Cuba? What happens today with North Korea or any other social heavens? What actually happens? Do they live as they want to live? For example, there are some myths about Cuba that they are having the best health system or they are having the best and more
Social security and stuff.
yes.
Yes.
Is it actually true? Then why Cuba is trying to reach a capitalistic approach? Because if you know, 2 years ago, the individual property came up in Cuba, and I think their parliament made a law allowing private property. And there is an initial way in order to reach Western countries' way of life and standards of living. So, what is the socialist way the best way to live our lives? Are we based on what the governor thinks about our structure, about our social structure, is his opinion better than our own individual opinion?
Yeah, I mean, you're right to point this out, but it does seem we're going to this I don't know, European Soviet state, and just to go back to philosophy, there has been this weird merger between liberalism and socialism. In other words, the original liberal, because the term liberalism is so loaded and so confused, and it means one thing in Europe and another thing in America, but it used to mean, people like you, perhaps people
Yes,
like
but
me.
the American point of view, now it is also present in the European standards, because the liberal in Europe was, you have right, that it was something else than the American liberal. But now I think, nowadays, especially during the last year, I think it is exactly the same.
Yes. What
For example,
happened?
take a look at Guy Verhofstadt. It is a classical American liberal now speaking. If you take a look at what he uploads in social media, it is what Joe Biden thinks about the world today. Has nothing to do with freedom. And Verhofstadt was the leader of European liberalism as a political thinker.
And what is he uploading now, just for people listening?
He's uploading that this massive governmental cooperation is a right thing to do in order for us to confront the pandemic. We have to give money, governmental money, to people in need. But where could we find such great amounts of money? Is there any tree, is there any harvest that could give us such amount of money? The taxpayers give this money. So why Verhofstadt is the noble person who knows how to handle our money? This is the fundamental question. And if this is considered to be a liberal, then what the authoritarian way of thinking is about?
Yeah, well, you don't even want to see it. I mean, in Greece, it reached vulgar levels for me, because the government, the current government that we have, the Mitsotakis government, just uses these terms that, I'm gonna give here, I'm gonna give there, where are you giving this money?
He has a great bank account from his family, and he is a noble person. He's a very good person that he wants to give his fortune in our pockets.
Yeah, that would be
So
great.
why not? If he is very generous, let us have some money from his personal fortune.
Yes, that would be nice. Although his political party, from what I understand, actually owes some hundred tens of millions, just a lot
Yes,
of millions.
of course. And the debt is going higher and higher.
Yes, but what is strange to me as well is that what is happening in Greece is happening everywhere. It's just that in Greece it has a Greek flavor, which is always a little bit more vulgar, a little bit more perhaps left-leaning, at least in
Yes,
the
but also
rhetoric.
Greece has also the greatest debt all over the world. Let us see, for example, other European countries. Greece has 230% of GDP debt, and the immediate, the second country has the half debt comparing to Greece.
Yeah, I mean, this alone is important to bring out, because not many people know that Greece is actually the highest debted country in the world. And if I'm correct, back in 2011, when we signed the memorandum, Greece received the biggest loan in absolute numbers in the history of capitalism. Is that correct?
Yes, it is true, but nowadays we're at the exact same spot
Where we were.
we were before the memorandum.
Yes, and just on that, being a libertarian, I really want to ask you, because I had many discussions. It's a lot, it's a long time now. 2011 seems like a lifetime, and my opinions have changed somewhat. What were and are your opinions just on the Greek debt? What would be your approach, if not solution?
Look, the debt was actually made from our clientelistic approach regarding the state expenses. Each government had to hire great amounts of employees in order for them to vote their party And so same persons were becoming governors, and the same parties were the main authority of our country. But we have to change it, but it is very difficult to change this because it is based in a social view that in order for you to get a job and in order for you to make your life, you have to go to some political office and ask for politician to have some job in the public sector.
Yes, I mean, yeah.
So it is deeply rooted in our ideas and in our theory about the world.
But was our debt just the product of government spending? Because me personally,
Yes,
I
but
doubt it.
government spending is this is the actual debt. Government spending it was not a private debt. For example, Japan has a great deal of private debt. We are
No,
not the same case with Japan.
yeah, it was not private debt, but it seems to me that on top of this private, I mean, there was this theory that I heard from a few people. Varoufakis was one. Not that I'm endorsing him in any way, but I think in this case he spoke some truth, where he said that essentially Greece was used as a money laundry for German banks. So, long story short, his theory was that because the German government could not give money to the failing banks
We
directly.
had 1 million public employees, public servants, and we also are having now two and a half million of pensions. So we have 3.5 million people living directly from governmental money. So why we need some conspiracy theory about Germans or French or whatever? If we take a look at the exact numbers, you can see that government spending is huge. So we do not need any bank laundry or any other theory in order to reach these amounts.
Well, then why was Greece not allowed to default? Not allowed to default on its debt?
Well, this was a political issue about the European Union's integrity. If they let us default without any measure, it will be a very bad thing for all Europe. I think.
But to help Europe, should we just live the next decades in misery? I mean, if we are to help Europe's image, we should have received some help
The
back, I
solution
guess.
is to make our state smaller. If we make governmental spending less and if we make our state smaller, then we can gradually gain the position we are supposed to have inside among all other European members. But this is a difficult decision because you have to tell the public servant that he has to find another job. He has to find a job in the private sector. And I don't think he will be very willing to do such a thing.
Yes, yes. And that's a very Greek problem. I mean, that's for a larger discussion, of course. But back to the more global issues, it seems to be that the pandemic, which you correctly identified as a political problem, a series of political decisions, that is. The pandemic, if it's a political issue, it's a global political issue. And if it's a political project, it's a global political project. It's very hard for people to accept this because this immediately rings of conspiracy, whatever is global. But it seems that political parties are very coordinated on this strange plan of destruction. What's your take on this aspect?
Well, not all countries are in the same level of destruction. Let us take a look, for example, at the Texas state of the United States. Texas state, along with other members of U.S., took a different way and a different approach to this pandemic. They decided that lockdowns were not the necessary measure that has to be taken in order for health to become health levels to become better. So let us take, for example, Sweden or Switzerland in Europe, or Norway or Finland. They did not take these authoritarian measures that we in Greece or in France have taken. So there is indeed another approach. For example, Japan. Japan had no lockdowns during the last 2 years. Even during the first period, all the restaurants, all the hotels were open for public.
Yes, I mean Sweden. I think is a better example because it's a European country. But as you have noticed in your posts, Sweden has been almost censored as an example. In other words, and I remember one of your posts, you had a little like wordplay. It was almost like a Socratic dialogue where you talked with an imaginary opponent who
Yes,
tried,
you're right.
and he said, the imaginary opponent said, but look at Sweden, and you said, look again. But most people are there. They think that Sweden had this hecatomb of dead people because of
Well,
COVID.
take a look at the numbers. It is not. This is not the issue. Take a look at the numbers. We have the exact number of deaths. We have the same number of deaths.
But
And we have also distracted our society. We have an utter distraction of our society and of our individual properties. And Sweden has remained stable and is also trying to stand in its own feet without this distraction that caused a great deal of human misery here in Greece.
But there is a censorship. I mean, like, if this was a reasonable issue, if this was really a matter of health, this censorship would not have happened. I mean, underneath your posts, which, like I say, are very reasonable. Whoever's Greek, they can follow you and read them. Very often you have this Facebook disclaimer of, if you want true information about
Yes,
COVID.
I know.
Like, why this censorship?
Because they will have to support the official policy imposed to us by our states. I cannot expect from Facebook or from any other social media to be a revolutionary application. No. All these social media are under our politics and are often driven by directly from governors and directly from specific political parties. So I do not expect from Mark Zuckerberg to be the next great revolutionary.
But many would say that Mark Zuckerberg has more power than, at least Mitsotakis.
Yes, in an international level, yes, of course. But here in Greece, Facebook cooperates with official Greek authorities. They have a direct connection with police, for example. If you tell police that, look, this person tells bad things about me, and you will have to take a look, etc. It is a matter of time, a couple of hours, in order for police to discover the exact IP address deriving from the personal computer of this user who told bad things about you.
Yes, and being both
they have
of
direct
us.
access to you, and Facebook opens all its doors according to what the state and what the police wants to do. So we cannot trust, regarding our freedoms, any of those big social media, but we have to use them with a little precaution, because you have to know that when you write something and you upload it in Facebook, then scripta manent. It will be always there, and it may be always used against you. But
Yes.
taking this into account, you will have to behave in such way that your freedom will not be less
Compromised.
Yes, will not be compromised.
And just talking about philosophy, you mentioned a lot of modern thinkers, Descartes, Hobbes, Machiavelli. And me, I'm following a school of thought that sees a very radical break between the ancient and the modern world and places these thinkers exactly at the precipice of that break. In other words, the school that I'm following, perhaps inaugurated by Leo Strauss, sees these thinkers, Descartes, Machiavelli, as the great dissidents of the ancient worlds, the breakers with the tradition. And it's true that if you go down to their writings, they do open up the way to the modern world and to its problems. So when Descartes, in his Discourse on Method, for instance, says that essentially the greatest achievement of modern science will be health and the prolongment of our lives, he kind of counters the ancient world that would maybe place other ideals above it. And here we are, centuries later, living in a world that's far more Cartesian than Platonic, far more Machiavellian than Aristotelian. Do you think that the seeds of what we're living was planted in these early modernists?
If we are seeking about roots, of course, everything is contained in the ancient Greek philosophy. Ancient Greek philosophy is not only good, or it is not only bad. Ancient Greek philosophy contains all the philosophical world, all the thinking schools that we are also seeing today. We cannot think that the ancient Greeks were saints, or we cannot think that Socrates or Plato or Aristotle were angels, as I noted before.
Yes.
We have to take into account all these philosophical theories derived from ancient Greece, but in a critical way.
But do you see a radical break that these modernists, the Descartes and the Machiavellis did with the ancient world?
I think they are a mirror, more or less, regarding the ancient world. I don't think they actually said something completely different, but they were extending the ancient Greek thought in another way. But I cannot baptize this as a good thing or a bad thing. Descartes could be considered as a descendant of Aristotelian thought, but I cannot tell you that the Aristotelian thought is the ideal way to live our lives, because Aristotelian world is a linear world that begins to a specific spot and ends also to a specific spot. I don't think that this is the ideal way to live our lives. For example, I think that the pre-Socratic approach of things, considering that time is a circular scheme, it is the most appropriate for us, because death is not the end. Death could be considered as the exact spot in the circle, that it is the same with the beginning of all things. Mm-hmm. It is very difficult to imagine the world as a circle, but it is the most appropriate thing to do if we want to live like true philosophers and live a life worth living.
And just to finish up with a very important topic, vaccines and vaccine passports. Obviously, a big breach on our liberty in the name of a disease that, correct me if you think that I'm wrong, but on any rational inquiry, the vaccines are in the name of a disease that should be vanishing as we're speaking, should be running its circle, as you said about the philosophical way of thinking. Yet now it seems that we're forced to have this medical procedure more than any other time, right? What do you think about that?
Well, it is a technical issue that is an aspect of governmental authority. I don't think it is a very important one. It is a crucial issue, but it is a minor issue, I think. As I said, we were not allowed to leave our homes without sending an SMS message to our government. So, what is worse than that? Is the vaccine certification worse than the situation that could not allow you to make a walk outside your home?
Well, no,
I don't think so.
But it's more permanent. or it seems more permanent? Because it was obvious that at some point the walking
Well,
restriction
it is
would
an
be lifted.
expression of the governmental authority, and will be, I think, there will be more like this. But I do not think it is the worst one. The worst one is that government handles all our properties and all our money, and this is the worst case scenario we could live during our lifetime. It is not the specific certificate, the specific health certificate. It is the whole situation we are living.
Do, do you think that there's some kind of global coup happening in this world right now?
Uh, yes, in many aspects, yes, because it is a sudden situation. It happened during a few months. In any other case, this change, this massive change, would endure many years, and I would not be certain that it would be, it could succeed. So
It had to be done very quickly.
yes, and the globalization of the media and the internet helped. Internet is not bad, and new technologies are not bad, but they help this change to be quicker, and so we have to be double. We have to be double as. Sorry, because it is.
Yes.
It is not my native language.
No, no, don't worry. It's
We have to be very careful in order for us to make our own decisions without having our governor above our heads.
yes, yes, yes. It's true. And just finishing up with your actual program, the PPEL, the Philosophy, Politics, Economy Laboratory. How is the situation in academia? Are you allowed to express the thoughts that you're expressing on Facebook? Are you not?
Yes, of course, we're a small team. Of course, we're not socialists or we're not communists. We are mainly based on liberty ideas. So I'm mainly free to express my opinion. We know each other for many years, and I feel safe inside this laboratory. And we have many interesting things in front of us. For example, we are targeting at putting philosophy in the primary schools here in Greece.
How will that look? What type of philosophy will that be?
We do not have any philosophy as a lesson nowadays in primary school.
Okay.
Philosophy is a lesson in lyceum, what it is called, in high school here in Greece. It is not in the primary education. So we want to put philosophy early during the first developmental stages of children, in order to make them learn how to think. We do not want to put exact knowledge inside their brains. We have to make them think in a right way, taking into account both rational thought and data deriving from the world of experience. But we have to make them learn how to think and how to discover things, which is very difficult. And this is the. We
You
have
are
a great.
very Cartesian. I can see that.
I cannot tell you about this. You are telling this, but it is not a bad thing.
No,
After
no,
all.
no. Like you said, it's like nature, perhaps. It's a thing. It's a res.
Yes, why not?
To play.
We'll try such things. I hope we will make it out, but it is a very difficult. There is a very difficult way in front of us. but we are trained to overcome these hurdles, I
Yes,
think.
yes, yes. Well, yeah, I mean, very, very good luck with that. It's definitely needed, and yeah, your effort is
Thank you,
more.
but we will also need your cooperation.
Well,
All,
yeah, yeah, all of us, you mean,
yes.
or my specifically, you have
No, no,
it.
no. Yes,
Yes.
of course, I know.
So I want to thank you very much for taking the time and having this conversation. Um, and I
Thank you too.
would like to think this is just the beginning of many interesting conversation to come. So if you want to say anything to our audience, I'm gonna post some links to your work that are in English, hopefully, and
Yes. I don't know if your audience is Greek or they are.
there's a lot of Greeks. Obviously, the reason why I'm doing this in English is because I'm trying to cover an English-speaking audience. But as it stands, half of our audience is Greek, which is fine with me, actually.
Okay, my wish is for them to think clearly outside of the mainstream media. I personally have switched off my television box. I am mainly taking information from the objective sources, from the most objective sources I could find.
Yes,
Uh,
yes, yes.
and I'm not relying on my government to. I do not think that government is the suitable to make my life better.
Yes,
Each one
yes.
is the most suitable person to make their own lives better.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Great, great, great to have this conversation, and our paths will cross again. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.